So, when we think about branding, I think the common way to think about a brand is some consumer brand, like the things that we use all the time, the stores that we go to, the companies maybe that we invest in, or we think of a brand as being this big, I don't know, national kind of thing. And what I've learned I've been in the real estate business in various ways for 20 years. This is my 20th year in the industry, and having been around real estate professionals, agents, all throughout that time, individual agents are their own brands, and one of the things that helped me develop, I guess, this talk or this series of points that you'll see today is that we all are brands. If you have a business card and you're ambitious about using it, then you are therefore a brand. And I think in the real estate industry, that's very obvious. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to walk through how to build your personal brand. I am going to look at some national brands. We're going to talk about just what it means to create, your individual brand. None of this that we're going to talk about today costs any money. None of it's going to cost time, and it's going to cost kind of a mentality change on your part. But this is stuff that has a direct return on that time investment, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I promise this is going to be entertaining. All these are personal stories, and a lot of these are my personal opinions, just based on my experience in the industry and my background in marketing and advertising. So let's go. So here's a little outline of what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to build your personal brand using some examples from my life and yours too, hopefully. So we're going to talk about these in order. The first one that we're going to cover in just a little bit is just knowing who you are. You really can't build yourself as a brand without understanding who you are. Companies that create these multi-million-dollar branding exercises, and them. Geico is a good example. Walmart is a good example. These are all brands that have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars behind them, and it starts with self-awareness. You can't really talk about who you are and what you do without understanding who you are first. So secondly, know who your client is. So as you go through this, you're not just building a brand just to make yourself feel good. You actually are doing this for a reason, and particularly in real estate, to understand who you are. And as you're building a brand around that, the next logical step is you're going to make some money doing this. It's going to be hard it's fairly straightforward to build a brand. To maintain a brand actually does cost money and does cost some investment. So knowing who your client is a good first step. A good second step in the order of operations here. Knowing your value is a big one. And I think in this list of four things, we'll get to the fourth one in just a second, but the third, this one may be the most important, is knowing what your value is. And I'll say this a few times, throughout our time together today, but knowing how important you are, what the service that you provide, because there are 1.2 million real estate agents in the country, and they all pretty much do the same thing. And I mean, they all pretty much follow the same steps. They follow the same process. Yes, they have different ways that they execute that process. They obviously work in different markets. They sell different kinds of properties within those markets. They have vastly different, attitudes and approaches to this process. But essentially, buying and selling a home on the professional side is a fairly streamlined, linear process that's repeated whether you work in Northwest Mississippi or you work in San Francisco. The process is largely the same. So knowing what your value is within that process is absolutely critical. And so we'll cover that as well. And then finally, the fourth piece is the ability to tell your story. So it's one thing to know who you are as you build your brand, to know what your clients' needs are and who they are is obviously important. Knowing what your value is critical, and maybe the most important. And then finally, your ability to say that in a way that your current clients understand, who you are and how you're different than the other 1.2 million real estate agents in the country, but also the people who are about to be your clients. That's probably the most important person that we think about in building a brand is not who you're working with right now, but who you're about to, the people who don't know you yet. Okay. So far, so good. Everybody's still awake. I'm on my second cup of coffee, so we may be done here in about 10 minutes. I don't know. I'm going pretty fast. So I'm going to tell you a story, and this is a pretty funny story. When I started with Zillow, um, first of all, I'm 46. I would like to consider myself reasonably stylish. Okay. I think I'm a pretty fun guy. And so when I started at Zillow, they had, I went out to interview. First of all, and, say what you want to say about Zillow now that I haven't been there for 2 years. It was a great place to work. I really enjoyed it. You may hate them, and that's fine, but I had a good time while I was there. But I'm glad to be gone. Let's just put it that way. But when I started there, I went out to interview, and your standard interview thing. I went out there in a suit, and which is that was way. My mom always taught me when you go out there, dress for the position that you want, right? So I was way overdressed. My suit was not new. Let's put it that way. And I left that experience. I was out. This is out in Seattle for 3 or 4 days. Met the team, and got the job, and then hung around for a couple more days, and it became abundantly obvious to me while I was hanging out with the people that I was going to be working for and working with that my wardrobe was at least 10 years old. By the way, it's garbage day, so sorry for the garbage truck noise. They're picking up my garbage can right now. So I came back from Seattle, feeling good about myself professionally, but feeling terrible about myself from a wardrobe standpoint. And unfortunately, this stuff matters. I mean, this stuff matters. You don't go, to meet a client for the first time, with just any old thing. You have to invest in what you look like, and really, this is a part of your personal brand. So if I could take a quick time out on this point, it may seem irrelevant to you, or it may seem a little, I don't know, marginal in relation to your brand, but you really are, sadly, what you look like, what you sound like. I just told you that I'm born and raised in Huntsville, Alabama, and I work with a lot of people from around the country, and they say all the time I don't have an accent. I don't love that. I do like the fact that every now and then I'll be fixing to do something, but for the most part, I have just conditioned myself to turn a lot of that off. And I don't know, there's arguments to be made about not doing that and being true to who you are. I certainly believe in that, but there's also an argument to be made about being universally, I don't know, accepted around the country. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, tangent. But in this way, I came back from Seattle and I'm like, I don't look the way I should. My brand is suffering and I need to spruce that up. So I get online, shopping for clothes, and there's a company called Stitch Fix, and there's a company called Trunk Club, and they both sell to men and women. Although Stitch Fix started out as a female focused clothing brand, and then Trunk Club was male focused. So at the time, the Trunk Club was just serving men's clothing. And so I get online and I sign up for Trunk Club, which is this monthly service that you take this test, this kind of fill out all these forms about clothes that you like and what you wear, what you're looking for, and they'll send you a box of clothes in the mail every month, and which is awesome for me because I don't like to shop. I'm more of a buyer, and so I get this trunk in the mail, and it's got all this stuff in it, and it's perfect. I loved it, and I use it for a couple of months, and then one day I got an email from Trunk Club, and they invited me to visit their retail store, and they only had a handful of these around the country. One of them is Chicago, so I was going to be in Chicago in the next couple of months, so I made an appointment to go to their retail store, and it was really just to kind of look around. I was a client. I figured this was going to be, just to go look around. Well, you can tell by the picture that I've got up here on this slide that this was not just to look around. I walk into this room, and I'm doing the quote fingers. The stylist meets me at the door, And listen, we're all friends here. She was not unattractive. And so then the next thing is she walks me over into this room, which looks just like this. And it was all my sizes in like multi thousands of dollars worth of clothes. Okay. And I am not in that tax bracket. All right. I am like a one shirt here, a pair of jeans here kind of guy. But they threw everything at me. I mean, everything. They threw so much at me that she walks around. I'll get in there. They've got like, Sports Center on the TV, and there's all this stuff is just, I mean, they are over the top selling me. And then this happens. She walks around the corner with a beer. She's like, "Hey, I hear you're a beer fan." I'm like, "How do you know this?" "Yes, I will gladly take a beer from you, but this is dangerous." And then, so I start trying on clothes. Next thing you know, boom, there's the next beer. Next thing you know, boom, there's the next beer. You know where this is going. Okay. So, like an hour in, I have tried on all these clothes, and they are like writing down. There's like a crew of people in here. And I feel like Bill Gates, which is not good because I'm definitely not Bill Gates. And so by the time it's over, I have spent a lot of money, more than I could have, really. But the silver lining here is that I did get an update. I just didn't want it to happen all at the same time, but I did get an update, and that was nice. But the point of me telling you that is that was a brand experience. That I could have gone to the local Belk or department store at the mall that's a few miles from my house. I could have done everything that happened that day. Probably saved a lot of money. But the Trunk Club brand is service. The Trunk Club brand is that room that you see right there, and their knowledge of me, their research of me. They thought I was a much bigger deal than I was, obviously, because they researched the fact that I, was a beer fan and a sports fan, and they catered to me specifically. And I know they do this for everybody, but the fact that I was in that room and that they had gathered all these things that they knew that would be appropriate for what I was looking for and all that stuff was just an over the top experience. And even though I did spend too much money, I walked out of there feeling like $1 million. I mean, that was an amazing experience and true to their brand. That was what they do, and that was an amazing experience. So, moving along, one of the things that was part of this initial like way over the top, you know, beer fueled purchase at Trunk Club in Chicago was this. I bought a T-shirt. This was part of the thing. I bought a sport coat and a couple of pairs of nice pants and all that stuff that I would need in my new job. But then included in this was this T-shirt, black T-shirt. I wear them all the time. It's kind of like a standard thing, T-shirt and jeans, and I'm a black T-shirt guy, plain, and I found one. Now, here's the thing: that T-shirt was $58. Okay, I would never. I am not a $58 T-shirt guy. I have one, and it is the best shirt I've ever had in my life. It is worth every penny of $58. I will never own another one, but that is my favorite shirt. The reason why it's $58 is it's made out of this amazing material. It's stretchy, it's cotton, and blah blah blah. But it's also came from Trunk Club, so it's an extension of that brand experience that I had when I was in their building. A $58 T-shirt makes perfect sense in that context. So I'm going to use this example of that T-shirt a little bit as we go forward, because there are lots of black T-shirts out there, and most of them are not $58. Um, but that's going to be a good example for us as we keep going. Um, because I could have bought a T-shirt just like that, very similar. Now maybe not the same fabric and not the same overall quality, but I could have bought that T-shirt for $7, and because I saw it for $7 at this place, and I'm going to give you one guess of where that is because you probably have one near you. And I hate to pick on these people, but every time I walk into an Old Navy, it looks like it's just been robbed. I mean, every Old Navy looks like a crowd of people has just come in there and stolen everything and left everything on the floor. It is a brand disaster. But you don't go there for nice, neatly packed shelves. You don't walk into an Old Navy. First of all, you walk into an Old Navy and no one talks to you. But you're not there for the brand experience to feel like you're special, because you're not. You're looking for a $7 T-shirt, and they know that. So they're going to spend as little time on you as possible. The brand is about cheap, and that doesn't mean necessarily poor quality, although those two things generally go together. But if you're price shopping, you're not going to a trunk club. If you are price shopping, you're probably going to a Gap or a Banana Republic, not so much, but the same kind of level of stuff. So that T-shirt is a way for me to tell you how important branding is, how important the service experience is, and what a brand means in that context is when people approach you and they're looking to cut down on your commission, because they're looking for, they're thinking of you as this T-shirt. They're thinking that you are doing something that somebody else that they know, and I'm sure they know plenty of people that have their real estate license. You know that you're a $58 T-shirt, okay? You know that you give them the trunk club experience, and you know what that means. You do. They don't. They think they're price shopping. And if there's someone who is approaching you to represent them in their transaction, you have to turn them from, they think that there's just a sea of Old Navies out there, and you have to turn them into someone who knows what the value of that $58 shirt is, because that's what you are. You are a professional, you are an expert, you know what you're doing. You've been doing this for a long time. You know how to treat people, you know how to get things done, you know how to serve your client. And that's about as stark of a contrast that I can give you is that real estate is a commodity, and the general public thinks that everybody does the same thing, and they just don't, and you know that. And so that's what branding does. Branding gets you from everybody thinking that you're an Old Navy to everybody knowing that you're different. So we're going to look at a few things. I'm going to go through a couple of logos for you, and I want to give you just a quick exercise in how we view branding that we see. So we'll start with a few logos here. So I'm not a huge Starbucks fan. But what I do know about Starbucks is that they care about the brand experience. They are incredibly brand aware. If you walk into a Starbucks in South Haven and you walk into a Starbucks in Huntsville, or you walk into a Starbucks in Singapore, you get the exact same experience. The stores look very much the same. The coffee is exactly the same. It's consistency, it's quality. Say what you want about Starbucks. It's an overpriced cup of coffee. And personally, I think if your coffee order takes more than 3 words, then I don't know what you're doing, but that's just me. Next is Target. Target has a brand, and you can say what you want about Target. You can probably find a lot of the same things at Walmart for a lot cheaper, but you walk into a Walmart, and you don't get the same level of service that you get at Target, period. And people know that. That's why Target's more expensive. You pay for that experience. That's a brand experience. Again, products being equal, you may find a few more things at Target that you wouldn't find at Walmart and vice versa, but you're not going to Target because you're looking for a bargain necessarily. You're going because of service quality. United Way is another example of incredibly brand aware, and they do sell something. They are a brand, and they do represent something, and you know what that is. You can just look at this logo and you know what United Way does. Where the money goes, not 100% sure 100% of the time. That's just me. I probably need to look into that, but I just know what the brand United Way means. I also know what AT&T means, because they get most of my money thanks to my 3 kids and their cell phones. I'm not a huge fan of their service, but it's a brand. It's one that I know really well. That logo says something to me. They are reliable. It is expensive, but what isn't when it comes to mobile data? But the reason why I brought you all those 4 is to show you this one, is because that is your brand. It may not be a brand that you think about very often, but you are a realtor, and what a realtor is isn't something that the general public is aware of. They see ads. The National Association puts out ads on your behalf, and you are represented by that logo. And I think it's important for all of us to understand what that logo means, because it's on everything that you do, and it stands for a lot of stuff. And if you could do yourself a favor by supporting that logo, and understanding just what the National Association means for you. Again, there's lots of opinions around exactly what the value of the National Association is. I'm not here to comment on that. I'm just telling you that that's a logo that you carry, and it's a sign of integrity and ethics, and attention to community, and it's something that we should all be aware of and we should all support. Um, so if you're not aware of what a realtor means, and if you don't say it right, then I'll make fun of you. It's realtor. Anyway, so of course Amanda can tell you a whole lot more about that. But if you're wondering what realtor means and what the R represents, then that's something that we should all be aware of. Okay, digging in finally. So what do you do? This is a question I get asked all the time, because a lot of people think that I'm a black t-shirt and they don't know how much I'm worth. It's hard for me to say what I'm worth in one sentence, but it's worth a shot. I have a statement that I make when I tell people what I do. I'm industry relations for a real estate brokers out of New York City. And Compass, we have Compass BBVA here. It's a bank. And every time I say that I work for Compass, people think I work for a bank. So I have to talk my way out of that. But that's a question. If I were going to get you to write down something today, one of the first things I would get you to write down and kind of just think about, and is for homework, is the answer to that question. So what do you do? Because when people ask you what you do and you say I'm a real estate agent, you've just lumped yourself in with 1.2 million other people that do the exact same thing and say the exact same thing. So you are a lot more than that. You are something different. And your statement could be as varied as you make people happy. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but that's really what you do. You make dreams come true. It may sound a little cheesy, but you do that too. I'm not telling you what to say, and I don't know what your specific answer would be to this question, but I think it's something you should think about, because what you say to that, your answer to that question is your brand statement. Like, what really do you do? You don't fill out forms. You don't show houses. You don't unlock houses and let people in. You do a lot more than that. And so considering what you say in that statement, I think, is the first step in building your brand. Okay. So again, back to building your brand, knowing who you are, knowing your client, knowing what your value is, and then being able to tell that story. So we've already covered a little bit about knowing who you are and what a brand is, big picture. But we're going to go over now and start with step one. Hey, Amanda, I'm going to pause real quick. Are we good?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure you're still there. I can't see you. So making sure that everybody is still alive.
Yep.
All right. Great. Okay. So step one on knowing who you are. So down the street from me is this place. It's Looter Hardware, and it's been there for 100 years. And I've been saying that for a long time, so I think it's like 115 years now. But it's this, it's like a hardware store that smells like linseed oil and dark wood everywhere, and it's been there for 100 years. So they've cats live inside the building. I mean, it's an awesome place. They sell little red wagons and old kind of they sell cast iron skillets, and it's just really kind of a very southern, very cool place, where old school kind of hardware store. And the same family has owned it for that entire time. And this guy down there, a really good friend of mine, his name is Donnie Luter, and he's the third generation owner of Luter Hardware. And you can tell just by looking at him what he's like. I mean, he's fantastic, and he knows everything. He's done everything. And if you know me, and you know that I get clothes mailed to me in boxes every month, that I am not the handiest dude in the world, and I'm not very good with a hammer and nails. My dad failed me in that way. So I don't fix things. I just break things, and then I go see Donnie, and Donnie helps me to make the world right again. But like, he's got the big pile of peanuts there on the counter, and you go in there and eat peanuts and leave them shells on the floor, and it's just a really cool place. But the way it works is you walk in, and Donnie or somebody related to Donnie is usually standing right there as you walk in the door. They're just hanging out. And so I walk in, and Donnie's like, "What'd you break this time?" And I tell him, waving my hands in the air, and he tells me what to buy. And he walks me down the aisle. He picks up the thing. He puts it in my hand. We go to the counter. I check out. He asked me about my mom. I think his dad has secretly had a crush on my mom for a long time. I think that's where that comes from. But anyway, so he asked me about my mom, and then I leave. And this is why the reason why I want to show you this is as an example of knowing who you are, is because of this. So this is a map of where Looter Hardware is in downtown Huntsville. That's the little green, dot there on the right. And the green dot up there in the upper left-hand corner is Home Depot. And actually, as the crow flies, Home Depot is 3 miles away from Luter Hardware, and Home Depot's been there for a very long time. And Luter Hardware, Donnie and his family haven't missed a beat. But I would tell you that when Home Depot opened 20 years ago or so, that they were nervous, because obviously Home Depot is a huge place and they have everything for cheaper than Luter can sell it. They have a lot more stuff. You could fit probably 5 Luter Hardwares inside Home Depot, and they have a staff of 100 people that are walking around the store. And Donnie has like 5 people that work for him, and I know he was nervous about that, of going out of business. Those places, Home Depot and Walmart and other places like that, have put a lot of places out of business, just like Luter Hardware. But they haven't. And so the reason why Donnie is on my slide is because I asked him about that one time, and he said this: they can't compete with us on service. And he's absolutely right. I mean, you go into especially now, but you walk into a Home Depot these days, and there are more people using the self checkout than there are obviously going to the counter. But Donnie wants to see you when you walk in, and really Home Depot does not want to see you. They would love for you to know what you want, get in there, and leave without them having to talk to you, because that costs them money. Whereas Donnie, all he does is service. The place isn't big enough for him not to see you. So when you walk in, he's going to talk to you. And for people like me, that means everything. So Donnie knows exactly who he is. Luter Hardware knows exactly who they are. As a brand exercise, I don't think Donnie knows a whole lot about branding, but at the same time, he's a brand expert because he does everything right. He knows who he is. He definitely knows his client. He definitely knows his value. He doesn't necessarily tell his story, but if you walk in and ask him, he will. So that's the example I'm giving you about knowing who you are. You know what your level of service is and what you bring to your clients, and it's a very Donnie Luter level of personal service. You're an expert. You know where everything is. You lead your client to the aisle. You pick it out for them, and you hand it to them. They pay you, and then you really don't go your separate ways. Actually, they come back to you over and over again, and they send people to you. That's how your business works. So if I were going to give you a great example of knowing who you are, it's that right there. Step number 2 is knowing your client. This is really big from a branding standpoint, because again, there are 1.2 million of us in the country, and because we all do the same thing generally, it's really important for us to get a feel for the service that we provide and how it relates to what our clients need. You know this because you've done many transactions, and now you know, I'm going to say, not necessarily know what your clients need, but I think the most important thing to know what your clients rely on you for is, you know, what your clients are afraid of. Real estate and the transaction itself is incredibly scary. They're afraid of losing money. They're leaving money on the table. They're afraid of making an offer on a house that's going to be a lemon. They're afraid of 100,000 things, and you are there as their counselor. This is where, you know, your talents as a therapist come into play. I mean, how many times has a client cried to you? I mean, probably a lot. So knowing what your clients are afraid of, I think, is a huge thing in terms of branding. So this is my example for you, is this statement right here that I think is really important to remember as you really interact with your clients: is build a brand around what their facts are and not assumptions. Is people who are new to the business think that everything runs smoothly. They think that everything runs like HGTV, and that every real estate transaction may have a few bumps here and there, but generally it all goes very smoothly. And I think for anybody who has done this for a long time, it's really the opposite. I mean, almost nothing goes right all the time, and there's always a snag. Very seldom do you get, you know, seamless transactions. So if you've been doing this for a while, you know what the facts are. You know what your clients are afraid of. You may know your client, but I think offering some advice here on furthering that: knowing your client is not a one-time thing. Once you feel like you've done every kind of transaction and you think you've seen it all, there's a new generation of people out there buying and selling houses. And the reason I threw this picture in there is because, backing up, you know, to when I was in the software business, we built products for real estate agents to use. And we did this by sitting in a conference room in Huntsville, Alabama, with a bunch of, you know, engineers and people who talk about software, clicking and dragging and all that jazz. And so we started building products, and then we release products, and then we watch adoption. And that's how the software business works, right? Like Apple puts out a new phone, and then they watch how people react to it. Well, it turns out that the way the software business works and the way that your business works should not be based on we're all going to sit around this conference room at my real estate office and think about what are things we can do to help our clients better. It's really having lunch with your clients with a notebook in front of you and asking them really after the fact, this kind of post-mortem interview with people that you've worked with before and say, hey, at what point did you begin to worry? At what point did you feel like that you weren't being treated as well as you could have? At what point were you nervous? At what point did you try to reach out to me and you couldn't get me? And taking notes on those things. And then building that into your deliverable. There was probably a time in your career when you were sending faxes to clients. There's probably a time when you were 100% on the telephone with your clients, and slowly you reached out to people who would only text you. And now I bet your communication via text is 100 times what it was even a year ago. That is knowing your client. You probably saw that coming, and it wasn't probably something you need to sit down to lunch over with somebody, but it's something that you've had to adjust. So if I were going to give you any advice on knowing your client, it is to talk to them. And don't make assumptions on what they need. Find out from them actually what they need. And unfortunately, a lot of what they need is based on their fears. When things go wrong is when you find out what your clients need, not when they're going right. Step 3 is knowing what your value is. And I'm gonna go through this a little quicker than I would like to, but there's a fork in the road here that I wanna kind of focus on. But I am going to go a little faster than I would want to normally. In knowing your value, I think it's really important to think about, again, what do you do? Like, what do you do for a living and how you approach it? There's 2 ways to look at work. It's either a job or it's a craft. You either have a job that you perform, or you actually work at something that is a professional. It's a profession. And I think most of us look at this as a profession, but there are lots of people that you work with and lots of people that you know that view this as just a job. And here's how those 2 things stack up. If your profession, quote unquote, requires little or no skill, if there's nothing special about how you approach what you do, most importantly, if what you do every day is task oriented, if you look at what you do every day and it's just a series of check boxes, if you're not proud of what you do, if your tools are cheap, if you're looking to get the cheapest thing off the shelf you can to your CRM or the web tools that you use or anything that you use, is you try to find the least expensive thing, the lowest barrier to just do the job. If you can't wait to stop talking to people every day, if you cannot wait to get home, if you just want to turn the phone off and soak in the bathtub every night, you may just be looking at this as a job. I'm not saying it isn't something you could do and do well. There are a lot of people out there that work at jobs that perform just fine, but it'll burn you out. It'll kill you over time. It will kill you. I've had plenty of jobs before, and I now have what I would consider a craft. And the difference is this: my skills make me very valuable. I knew that when I went to work at Zillow that I was good at what I did, and I was recruited by another company, and I left 2 years ago. Actually, yesterday was my 2-year anniversary, and they didn't hire someone who looked at this profession as a job. They wanted to hire someone who was a professional, and I like to think that I have unique skills that make me that. I'm very process oriented. I do not look at my career as just a series of check boxes. I love what I do and how I do it. And real estate is the same way. It's very process oriented. And if the process drags you down and you just want to some days just tear up all this paperwork and go home, that's normal. But if you want to do that every day, that may be a problem. And I'm really proud of what I do. And I think that people who excel at real estate are very proud of their work and proud of the results that they get, not just getting paid, but proud of how their clients come away from the experience. And I'm always trying to improve. I read books, I take classes when I can. A profession, really, by definition, is something that you're always honing. Um, so, and then finally, I use the best tools. I mean, go back to Trunk Club. I mean, I did buy a $58 T-shirt, and I realized that's not necessarily a tool, but I take my brand very seriously, and I think people who have a craft and who operate as a professional do as well. So, expert skill and craftsmanship. I mean, they're expensive, and you don't need me to tell you that the real estate commission, as a number, is being attacked. People are looking at ways to not pay you what you're worth, and I think it's our duty as real estate professionals is to make sure that we underscore our value to the people that we're working with and the people who we will be working with. Is that yes, the ultimate price is negotiable. Everything is, but you're a craftsman. You're not here doing a job. You're not a commodity. You're not Old Navy selling a product for the lowest price at the lowest price. You're the highest value. You're a craftsman, and you're worth that. So I wanted to show you this picture real quickly because the guy in the lower left-hand corner with a little girl on his knee, that's my great grandfather, and that's my mom on his knee, and he built furniture. But he was also a dairyman. He ran a dairy, but he also built furniture in his shed. And those are not his tools, but I imagine that his tool shed looked just like that. And he's a craftsman. He was. You look at his. My mom still has several pieces of his, and there's not a single nail in them. It's all tongue and groove stuff, and just amazing quality. And it's very rare that you find that anymore. You can certainly go to you go to Walmart and buy a folding table if you want to for $50, but his table that was made 100 years ago would sell for many, many thousands of dollars, and that's because it was made by a craftsman for somebody who was very process oriented and who believed in what he did, his skill. So yeah, just a little example there. Okay, finally, and we're gonna blast through this. I'm running out of time. I don't want to shortchange you on this part because this is important. Is once you know who you are, and once you know who your client is, what they need from you, and once you know what your value is, you may have really done a lot of that work already. It's telling your story that a lot of people have trouble with, and a lot of Southerners seem to have trouble with this. I've discovered, like, we're humble people. We don't do a lot of self promotion naturally. It's not generally who we are. We have a hard time standing up and saying how good we are. Unfortunately, in this business, you have to do that sometimes. It's easier to let other people say it, so it's testimonials in real estate are amazingly powerful. But sometimes you just have to tell someone face to face that you're really good at what you do, and don't be apologetic about that. But telling your story in 2020 requires social media. And I'm just going to give you just a couple of quick tips about that, about approaching social media from this standpoint. The first thing is that this is Facebook. As much as I sometimes hate Facebook, it's become a political freaking nightmare that I can't stand, and I've thought about quitting 100 times. But it's a necessary thing because it's the place where I get my information. I connect with my clients there. You connect with your clients there, and it's a necessary evil. We'll go into a few tips on how to use Facebook well in just a minute. But for now, I'm inviting you to go to Facebook specifically to begin this process of telling your story. One thing that I should remind you is that I'm sure many of you have hundreds, if not thousands, of friends on Facebook. And I wonder how often you use that medium to tell people what you do for a living. And the reason why I put this statement up there is stop selling yourself, just tell your story, is because I'm not saying that you should get on Facebook and say, hey, everybody, I'm the best realtor in Northwest Mississippi. That would be bad. But just to make updating people on your profession a part of what you do and on social media, saying the things that remind them that you're in the real estate business. This is not a place to sell. Again, I cannot underscore that enough. It's not a place for you to sell yourself, but it's a place to just, a good example would be, if you have a lot of showings this weekend, or, in the wake of our virus preparation, it would be easy for you to get on Facebook and say that you're still if you are showing property, the steps that you're taking to remain safe, and just reminding people that, you're conscious of safety and that you're in the real estate business. It's an incredibly valuable place to go. And I'm just wondering, just kind of out loud, how many people are potential clients that are already friends of yours on Facebook that don't know that you're in the real estate business and don't know that you can be a service to them right now. But also remember that Facebook is just one giant cocktail party where at any given time, people are super charged up about politics, or they've had a couple of glasses of wine. And so it is a place to be careful with how you say what you say. But I would just encourage you, as you begin to tell your story, to use the outlets that are already available to you, namely Facebook, and to do it in a way that you're not selling, but you're just reminding people that you are already friends with, because that's where your client base really, truly is, that you're in the business, that you're an expert, and that you know what your value is. Okay, so almost finally, looking at Facebook, I'm going to just give you a couple of little points to remember here. It's an online cocktail party, and I mean cocktail party specifically because it's a place where people get loose, even if they're not, having a cocktail at the time. It's a place where people generally have their guard down, and they don't want to be sold. You don't want to sell anything on Facebook. It's not. You can certainly announce an open house. You can certainly announce a house that you're particularly proud of that you're listing or whatever. But it's not a place for you to beat people over the head with your selling. That's really bad. But it is a place for you to remind people that you're in the profession. So again, be professional at all times. Be yourself at all times. Don't say anything on Facebook that you wouldn't say to someone who would be a potential client. Tell your story, never sell or pitch. I think I've said that enough. And who knows what you do? I've said that already, but just a reminder, I think 90% of your business comes from referrals. Online leads are valuable, but I think a vast majority of your business comes from either people you worked with before, or people who they know, or people who they know. Not a big deal, distance between who you're working with and who you've worked with in the past, generally speaking. And be consistent and be bold. That's a hard thing for us, is to be bold and say that we're good. Say that we're good at what we do. Tell people you're an expert. There's no shame in that, and you shouldn't avoid saying that. And also understand the platform, understand Facebook's rules, and understand, just how to use the platform, how to post a picture, how to post a video. Get used to using that tool. It's a very valuable tool and can be very useful to your business. Okay, so lastly, this goes back to the initial thing that we talked about is people ask you this all the time. What do you do? There's 1.2 million real estate professionals in the country who get asked this every day. What do you do? And you need an answer to that doesn't make you sound like the person who's in the office next to you, or the other 1.2 million real estate professionals around the country. You need to have your specific statement around that. I have one. It's not very good, but I'm still working on it. It's not an elevator pitch. This is just, what do you do? Thinking about the answer to that is, I think, one of the most important things about branding. That is your brand statement, is answering that question. Okay, that was a whole bunch. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to come back. I'm going to turn my video on. And Amanda, if there's anybody who has a question, I'm more than happy to answer now.
So, Bill, what is your line about what you do?
Well, so I get asked that here in town. And so I tell people that I work for a real estate broker in New York. And I say, I add the New York part because I don't want them to think that I sell real estate in Huntsville, because I don't sell real estate, number one, and I don't do anything in Huntsville. And then that they ask a lot more questions, and then I get to say, like, well, I'm kind of like a professional diplomat, and then my statement really is more of a very awkward paragraph. But so I don't really actually have a chance to answer that question very often, to be honest. But mine stinks is the answer to your question.
Does anybody have any questions? Anybody?
The Facebook thing is actually another class. I mean, that actually is something that needs to be, that's another 45 minutes of social media is once you have your brand together and once you kind of know who you are, saying that and saying it in a way that is valuable, and that you can then go back and look and measure is another thing that we don't have time for. But I would also add that, uh, like, well, Amanda, my former wife is a Keller Williams agent here in Huntsville, and she's killing it. She's doing a killer business. Keller Williams is a great company and is the right fit for her right now. I do not know that it's going to be the right fit for her long term. I mean, people switch companies. And I think that a lot of real estate people get into the business, and I don't want to offend anybody, especially any brokers, but not every agent is a lifer at any one brokerage, which really underscores the fact that you're the brand. I may not be at Compass forever, and so my brand is Bill Fowler. My brand is not Compass. My brand was definitely not Zillow, and my brand was not Solid Earth before that. My brand is me, and so it's important for me to love the company that I work for, and certainly advocate and do good work for the company I work for. But especially in real estate, you need to be aware that your brand is your name, not your company.
I love that you said that it's not a job, it's a career. Our president, Leanne, she's said that a few times to people this year, because you have to think long term. And then it's really funny to me, like when we have new member orientation and I ask agents, why they're in it or whatever else, how many of them raise their hand because of money? A lot of them don't know the difference between a licensee and a realtor. And if you don't know your why or your value, how are you going to convince somebody to give you commission? Like if you don't even know, how can you ask somebody else? So I think that's good stuff.
Yeah, my mom is selling her house, just as an example of value as it relates to commission. My mom is selling her house, and she had a list price, and she just got an offer, and then so Melanie, my ex, is her realtor on the sell side, of course. And so Melanie sent her this estimated closing cost statement. And my mom has been around for a while, and she's sold plenty of houses. But she calls me and she said, "You mean we have to pay this other agent how much?" And you really don't want your client to have sticker shock when they're paying you. You want the closing to be a happy event, and you want the check that you get to be for them to feel like, you're not getting paid enough. The amount of work that you did and the amount of time that you spent, the amount of communication, just the information that you gave me. I mean, you want that value to be overwhelming. And that's where commission pressure, I think, is that the general public thinks that everybody does this the same way, and that's just not true.
I agree.
Yeah, so the job or craft thing, I wonder how durable the market is. I think we're going to see I went out last night to this outdoor patio, this restaurant that's open. We're open over here. I mean, they opened bars and restaurants yesterday. So just because I'm tired of my kids in these four walls, I just went to, there's this big open patio downtown, and sat in the corner and just watched. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but this is not going to go away anytime soon. And we have to get good at selling real estate in this environment. But I wonder, there are a lot of people out there that carry licenses that look at this as a job. And how many of those people are going to be around in 2-3 months if this keeps going, the way it is? All right. Well, thanks. I have 7 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, then certainly ask them right now. And if you'd rather ask a question privately, Amanda, you know how to get to me, and I'd be more than happy to answer anybody's question offline.